Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It's Jessica Ward King, the StigmaCrusher here. Last week, one of my subscribers sent me a news article from British Columbia where it described that an individual was standing on the outside of the guardrails of the Alexandra Bridge, which is a bridge that connects the mainland to the island, and was wanting to die by suicide. The police were called and they arrived, and they were attempting to talk the individual down, get them on the right side of the guardrail. And they had to close a couple of lanes of traffic in order to give themselves and this person enough space to be able to work. And this caused people, the commuters, to be so upset about the inconvenience to them in their day that some of them, not all of them, certainly not, but enough. Even one is enough, but it was more than one. So some of them would honk their horns, some of them would roll down their windows and yell, and some of them even went out of their way to stop their car, get out and walk on the sidewalk to this individual and tell him just to jump already. Get it over with. Open the lanes of traffic. And the reason I tell you this is because one of the most common things that I hear is that suicide is selfish. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit today. Why suicide can be seen as selfish, whether I think suicide is selfish, and how it can be seen otherwise. So I have actually been told suicide is selfish while I've been suicidal. I find that when someone that you love is suicidal, wanting to die by suicide, you kind of go through any different way. You get desperate. So it's like any way at all that you can think of to get them not to behave in that way, not to go through with that act. And so you start being very empathetic and you start by holding their hand. But a person with suicidal ideation, it's not just one crying session, you get some Ben and Jerry's, you watch a rom-com, and you're good. Suicidal ideation persists. It persists for days and days and days and weeks and months and years sometimes. And as a person who is loving someone with mental illness, who is wanting to die by suicide, it can be very frustrating because you think you've gone through all the arguments, you think you've convinced them, and then they're right back at square one again, wanting to die by suicide. And so you go through these different feelings. It's like different stages of grief, but not. And so you go through the empathy, you go through the sitting and crying and talking. And then you go through the anger. Like, how dare you? How could you leave me alone? What do you think? Who do you think your son's going to grow up with? How are we going to survive without you? You get very angry. And so I've had my loved ones very angrily tell me I'm being selfish. And it hurts. And for a moment, it makes me think, I can't do this to them. But the problem with depression, which is very often linked with suicidal ideation, is that one of the symptoms is delusional guilt. So delusional guilt is guilt. So guilt can be linked to real life events, right? Like you can feel guilty that you are, let's say you're not a good mother because you do not have custody of your child. And so you've been told you're not a good mother. And so you have guilt about that. And that might be realistic guilt, right? Because you've been told that. Delusional guilt, though, is guilt that's out of proportion to real life events. And so for me, this is my lived experience, part of my delusional guilt when I am suicidal is that I have such a burden to my family that they would be better off without me. And it seems very, very rational that, it would be better if my son grew up without a mother who was depressed all the time and then manic and then depressed again. He'd be better off. that my wife would be better off. Yes, they would be in pain at first, they would grieve, but then they would move on, and my wife would meet another person, and my son would have a mother that's, working order to grow up with, and that, they would be a lot better off without me. And that guilt that I'm a burden to them, that I'm just bringing them down, that I'm a waste of space, that I don't deserve to live, that I'm horrible, that guilt is partly, not wholly, but partly what drives my suicidal ideation. And so someone says to me, "You're being selfish." My actual argument back is, this is the least selfish thing I could possibly do. Because we do, as humans, have a drive to survive, right? We have that survival instinct. It's kept us alive all these millennia. But we also can have a drive towards death. And they're in complete opposite, right? They're oppositional. But it's not completely unrealistic to have that drive as well. And because it persists in the Canadian, or in the population, the human population, we know that it has had it's been linked genetically somehow to an evolutionary advantage, perhaps in a way that keeps the herd healthy or something. We don't know. But telling me that it's selfish doesn't feel right when I'm suicidal. I actually think, no, I'm doing this for the people that I love. I have never attempted to die by suicide in a way that has inconvenienced other people, like, for example, in traffic, a train, anything like that. But I can't imagine going and climbing over the guardrail of a bridge and thinking, ha ha ha, I'm going to stop the commuting traffic today. It's really not, it doesn't seem like that would be in my mind. It seems like I would be terrified. It seems like I would intend to get it over with quickly, but look down and be afraid and want to go through the reasoning one more time. And that's what gets the police called, and that's what gets the traffic stopped. And so is it selfish of that person to want to die by suicide and to want to do it on a bridge where it inconveniences people? Well, another thing that I've had in my lived experience is that I never wanted to attempt suicide. I wanted to complete suicide. So I didn't want to attempt it and then be taken to the hospital and, be saved and then wake up. I wanted to make sure if I was going to die by suicide that I was going to die. And so I have great empathy for this person, because especially in winter, jumping off that bridge, there's no way a person is going to survive. Even if they survived the fall, they would die of hypothermia in the water. So it would be a final solution. And I get that. I have great empathy for that. I understand that if you've never had suicidal ideation, that it's difficult to have empathy for that. I do understand. It's not something that's within the realm of most people's experience, and so it's difficult to empathize. But I have great empathy for it. And stopping some traffic, even if it really inconveniences a whole lot of people, is worth a life. Now, I can tell you that after 8 hours of talking to this individual, they did get this individual off of the bridge. They got him to the hospital where he could get assistance. He's probably still there. And this has only been a week, so he's almost certainly still there. And he's safe. So they did manage to save him, despite the best efforts of some of these commuters. So what can we do to make sure this doesn't happen again? Well, one thing we can do is make sure that there are safety guards on things like bridges, on things like, in train stations, that kind of thing. We can make sure that they build the appropriate safety measures. That's one thing we can do. There are other bridges, for example, in the United States that I know about where there are phones. There are like emergency phones where all you have to do is press a button and it goes straight to a suicide helpline. So that if you are thinking of dying by suicide on that bridge, there's literally wired into the bridge help for you. And those can help reduce suicides off of the bridge. But we can't, not everybody goes to die by suicide in public. Most people will do this in private. And so what can we do on a more interpersonal level? Well, as I said, it is difficult to empathize if you don't have any experience with suicidal ideation. Now, we know that 11 people in Canada die by suicide every day. That's a lot of people. We don't have a huge population, huge country, not a huge population. 11 people die by suicide every day, and many, many more attempt suicide but are saved. So if everybody could get the training that they need to know what to do when someone that they love is suicidal, that would go a long way. And there is training available for this. We have in Canada mental health first aid, which is a course that helps you learn, just like physical first aid, what to do with different kinds of psychological disorders or traumas, how to deal with it if you're the first one on the scene. So if you come and someone's crying and you're like, oh my God, and what do you do? And they say they want to die by suicide. What do you do? So there are courses that can help you learn this, because it doesn't necessarily come naturally. One thing I recommend doing is non-judgmental listening, and this can be hard. It is incredibly painful for a person to hear from someone that they love that that person wants to die by suicide. It's incredibly painful. And the first reaction can often be to recoil, can be to argue with the person, can be to get angry with the person, where that individual, it takes a lot of courage to tell someone, to actually say the words, like, I want to kill myself, I want to die by suicide. It takes a lot of courage. Even just role playing it takes a lot of courage to say those words and to ask a person, do you want to die by suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? It takes immense courage. And so knowing when to ask the question, are you thinking of dying by suicide? And knowing to just listen empathetically when a person wants to tell you. They may want to tell you why they're feeling this way, what they're feeling. They may want to tell you their plans. They may want to tell you why they haven't done it yet, why they want to live. They may want to tell you all kinds of things, and just listen empathetically. But it's also important to know when they need to get professional help. So whether that's calling their therapist or their psychiatrist or their family doctor, or whether that's taking them to the emergency room and having them assessed to potentially be brought into the inpatient unit or to get outpatient help. And it's terrifying, the thought of bringing someone to an inpatient unit at the hospital, because all we have, if you've never done it before, don't know anybody that's been in the hospital before, all we have is like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and Suicide Squad and even like Girl Interrupted, all of these movies that show us life on the psych ward. That's not exactly a flattering view, not exactly a realistic view either. That's not what it's like. But it's terrifying to think that bringing someone to a psychiatric ward, it's absolutely terrifying. And so you want to avoid it at all costs, right? Because it's terrifying, but you need to know when that's appropriate. So educating people, but also building empathy. Hearing from people who have not died by suicide, their reasoning when they're suicidal. Videos like this, for example, where I'm sharing with you what my suicidal ideation is like. Now, I'm not suicidal now, but I have been in the very recent past. So I'm not going back too far to remember. And so being able to share and to tell you what it's like can be helpful. So having more testimonies like this can help build empathy. So it's really, for me, it's those three things. It's actually building things safer so that people can't die by suicide on bridges, for example. It's building the knowledge base of the population so that they know what to do for first aid, for mental health. They know to call the police when they see someone on the bridge. They know to listen empathetically. They know when to take a person into the hospital. They know when to ask the question, are you thinking of dying by suicide? Do you have a plan? Those are the important questions that we need to know. And thirdly, to build that empathy. Because you can get mad at someone for wanting to die by suicide all day long, but that doesn't help the person that's struggling, that's in so much pain. So that's what I wanted to reflect on this week. I'm glad that this individual is safe, but like I said, 11 people die by suicide in this country every single day. We need to make sure that it's less than that. We need to do everything that we can to keep people from dying by suicide. Because from my experience, suicidal ideation does eventually end. And from my experience, this won't be everyone's experience, but from my experience, I'm glad I'm still here. I am glad that I did not die by suicide all of the different times that I have been suicidal. And that's why we need to keep people alive, to get to that point where they're glad that they didn't do it. Heavy one this week, I know, but the news was incredible. I had to address it. So take care of yourselves this week. Take care of your loved ones. And I will see you in my next one. Bye.
StigmaCrusher.